Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, how the heck are you? I'm going to tell you a little bit about this recording. Unfortunately, I recorded it a week ago. By the time you listen to the next episode, which will come out next week, 242 with Jen and I process and talk about this experience that we had. And what happened in this recording that you're going to hear is we jumped on to record. Jen asked me how I was doing. I had some attachment wounds that were coming up. I didn't know they were there. I didn't ask for consent, where normally I'll say, hey, I have some stuff going on around this. Are you in a place to hear it? And I just shared because I was so immersed in what was going on. And Jen had been going through some things. This may be redundant. I can't remember what I said in the episode, so you may hear things twice today. And Jen really didn't have the capacity to support me where I was at. And we ended up not recording. But what happened is we stayed on the call for 45 minutes. We said we loved each other. We cared. We knew we would work it through. And then when she went on to do her thing, I thought, I'm just going to record and see where this goes. So what you're going to hear is a recording that I did pretty much a few minutes after this. I have a feeling that I called it a rupture. In retrospect, it's not a rupture. I work with a therapist. We do coaching, and for some reason, I keep calling it therapy. It's coaching. I had seen my coach on Monday. This happened Tuesday. Jen was going out of town on Thursday till Sunday, and then I met with my coach on Friday for an extra session, and then I met with my coach again on Monday because this really activated so much of my own wounding, and I don't know how much of that I was aware of in the moment. And since I recorded the episode that you're going to hear, I'm really seeing I was expecting Jen to meet needs that she can't meet, that this is about my trauma, my wounding. We've done a beautiful job working through the repair. I have to say that from the time I recorded this, I did have thoughts, and we talk about this in episode 242. Like, what if we don't do the repair work? What do I do about the podcast? How do I reassure you, the listener, that we're okay if we're not? Fortunately, none of that happened. And I'm sharing that because I think that those are pretty normal and average thoughts to have. So what you're going to hear is primarily me talking about what happened when, we had this little hiccup in our relationship. And at this point, we hadn't worked anything out. I hadn't talked to her. We basically got on to record, had this hiccup, and then I recorded. But I just want to reassure you that we are doing fine. It's been a week. I am really seeing how much of this it's really my stuff that I need to heal, and I feel really good about it. I'm sorry that you have to wait another week until episode 242 comes out to hear us both talk about it, but my hope is that you can trust that we are fine. We did a beautiful job navigating in the moment and being really honest since then. And I think it's helped me to be more honest and to take up more space, which is something I really, really struggle with. And I'm seeing myself practicing it in a number of different areas. So I think that's all I have. Now, on to the show. Hey there. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this recording, so I'm not even sure how to start. This is the second time I'm recording. I was hearing some funny feedback. I just had something happen with Jen. We're fine. We're in the middle of things, and we were going to record, and she asked me how I was doing. And I had some feelings come up that I sort of knew were there, wasn't planning on talking about it. I normally like to process through what's going on before I share. And as we were talking and crying, both of us were okay. She said, normally we ask for consent before we share things. And I wasn't even aware that I didn't ask for consent. I had no idea that this stuff was just bubbling up. And when she asked what was going on, I got tearful and shared something. And she had no idea this was coming. So she's been going through a lot of stuff recently and just kind of got on solid footing. And then me bringing up what was going on for me activated her stuff. Her stuff activated my stuff. I shared what was going on with me. It activated her stuff. And the two of us, this is the first time that we've really had a hard time kind of walking through things. We didn't record. We stayed on the call for probably 45 minutes, crying, being empathic, trying to hold space for each other. And it was really hard. And a couple things that came up for me was I was having some anger around what came up, but it felt so threatening for me to share it with her that I went into a fawn response. And if you're not familiar with that is, it's like very young, very apologetic, no anger on board there. And talking about the fear that I was having, I was able later on to tell her that I was in a fawn response and that it felt really scary. And then when she had stuff come up and was crying, the narrative that comes up for me is I shouldn't have said anything. I'm too much. I ruin relationships. Why did I say anything? Now everything has gone down the drain. And I don't want to talk too much about what came up for Jen. That's her story and her thing to share. But this is the first time that we've both had stuff going on and have had a limited capacity to be present and able to talk through it. And we were able to say, like, we don't know where to go from here. We're not going anywhere. I feel bad that my stuff triggered her stuff. She feels bad that her stuff triggered my stuff. I feel bad that she wasn't prepared for what was going on. She's been in a really rough spot. She finally got in a solid place for about a minute, and then having me share with her what I did without asking for consent. And when she said that to me, I was so into my feelings that I didn't even have the awareness to say, hey, can I talk to you about something? Are you in a space? And then I feel bad about that. We did say we don't know what we'll do without each other. We love each other. We're here for all of it. Here's the thing about wounding is wounds can lie dormant and not get activated until we're in a relationship and they get activated. And sometimes the only way to work through wounds is to be in a relationship. Now, Jen and I have this amazing capacity to be able to do our work usually together. And not a lot of people have the skills to do that, the insight, the trust. And so I recognize that this is a rare privilege that we have. But it felt scary. And I think not being in this place and what she said, and I believe it is, if I can't speak my truth in a relationship, then that's not okay. We both need to talk about the things that come up for us. I am aware that, and I think this is relatable, that if you have looping thinking, that you get stuck on something, that can be OCD. I'm not saying it's diagnosable, but traits of OCD can come up for us. And as I'm working with my coach, we're talking about this. And the loop that I want to go back to is, I'm too much. I'm too hard to be in a relationship. I shouldn't have said anything. I should have known to keep my mouth shut. The way that quote serves me is then I don't feel the pain, the confusion, the discomfort and dysregulation that Jen and I just had a bump in our relationship, a bump that we haven't had before like this. And if I go to that thought, then that takes me out of the uncertainty, the unknown, the dysregulation, the high feelings. And that thought doesn't serve me because the reality is I want to trust that Jen and I can work through this. We can have hard things come up. We have a lot of trust. We have a lot of love. We have a lot of respect. And sometimes we have a limited capacity. And part of the thing that is challenging is how much of this is about my history and how much of this is about what's going on in the moment. And it feels to me that the majority of this is history related and it's getting activated in the moment. I do think that there are some things in real time that happen that I'm aware of those shifts in where I feel in the relationship, and that activates stuff for me. And I have a really hard time taking up space. I don't think I've said this because I just started to record again. So if this is a repeat, I'm just going to trust it'll be okay. One of my sons, Daniel, was down and we went to do an activity. And it became very clear to me how I have a hard time taking up space and asking for what I want. And I had some disappointment around what happened because I, Patricia, not Daniel, did not say what I wanted and what I was needing. It's on me. And I think that when we are wired to be aware of other people and their needs. It feels really nice when we're around people that notice and intuit that, and we don't always have to ask because other people are aware and sometimes meeting our needs without us having to ask for them. That feels really yummy. That is not realistic. And it is my responsibility to ask for what I want. And I think some of it is some internalized ableism. I shouldn't have these needs. I shouldn't have these wants. But in my home, having 2 boys and a husband, I think I often felt like what I wanted and needed was just so different than what they needed. And it must be me and I must be wrong. If you've been listening for a while, you know I had some dizziness back in December. It's back. It's not as bad. But in the mornings, it's challenging. And I woke up on Sunday. Today's Tuesday. The dizziness was bad. I was sensitive to light. I was feeling nauseous. I got up and Steve and I were together and I told him I wasn't feeling well and I was sitting in a chair in the living room and my mom came in and she immediately said, "What's wrong?" You know, my mom and I are very attuned to each other and it's hard for me to not long for that kind of intuition in other people to notice what's going on and to be responsive. While that feels really great, that is not realistic. And for me to expect people to meet my needs without me having to ask for them is just not, it's not realistic. And if you are neurodivergent, if you're autistic, we have that wound of too much and not enough. It's the same wound and one tends to be more dominant than the other. And I really need to work on knowing that it's okay for me to take up space, to have wants and needs. I think what often happens is if you're early in your process, and you take a risk and you ask for what you want and you don't get that need met, the fear is all the rage from all the times that you didn't have a need met is going to come up and that's going to be too much to handle. And so better not to ask because we don't want to go there and open all of that up. And then what I have to say is, how is that working for you? Because it works until it doesn't work. And we do have a right to have needs and wants. And we learn to manage not getting our needs and wants met and the focus being on being in the process. And kind of like this thing with Jen, that it's not about us not triggering each other. It's about how do we navigate and how do we talk about it when it happens and how do we create space for each other. And if one of us or both of us don't have the capacity, how do we navigate that? And how do we come back to the relationship? Whew, this is a lot. This is a lot. And it feels scary. And I want to trust that Jen and I can work through this. And it will make us stronger. And it will be awkward to figure out how do we navigate through these things when they come up. And what I told Jen that my concern was in saying something is, I have expressed that when I'm unmasking and feeling really comfortable and free, and then I get feedback that I've done something wrong, I've said something wrong, somebody doesn't have the capacity, that I just kind of clam up. And then I don't want to be open anymore. If I can't figure out what the rule is, then I don't want to play. And so I really have or had a concern that that would come up. I also want to talk about something that I said, and I'm not sure what episode it was. I think it's a solo episode. Maybe, I'm not sure, 237, 238. It was an episode when I was talking about going up to spend the night at my son's house before he left for boot camp. And I'm wanting to have kind of a retraction. I talked about sharing pretty freely with my husband. And I said something about a realization I've had about being autistic. And he sighed and I asked what the sigh meant. And he said, sometimes it's a lot. And what I said in that episode is that he lost access to a part of me until I was ready to share again. And I that felt very harsh. I think that when we find our voice and when we're assertive, everything, it's like we have a hammer and everything looks like a nail. And once we learn to say no, then we kind of scream no. I feel like this is true about my autism, that all I want to do is talk about my autism and everything is through the lens of autism. And that may or may not change for me. What I would like to say is, and Jen said it beautifully in the episode, is so he didn't have the capacity in the moment. And our capacity changes and it's okay. We don't have to always have the capacity to be present for people. And in that moment, he may not have had the capacity. And so the loving thing for me to do is if somebody doesn't have the capacity, not a great time for me to share and open up and be vulnerable. And I think that is a little bit more compassionate than saying, you don't get access to this part of me. And I think there's a part of me that needed to feel empowered. And so I'm not going to regret saying what I said. But I wonder if sometimes I model things for y'all. And if one of you is going around saying, you don't get access to me. And there may be situations where that's appropriate. But I would like to have a little bit more of a compassionate approach to, I have valuable things to share and I want to share them when people have the capacity. If they don't have the capacity, then I either want to not share or wait till they have the capacity or find somebody who does have the capacity, and to do that with compassion and kindness. And if you don't have compassion and kindness, that's okay too. One of the things that I did want to talk about in this episode that Jen and I were going to record about, so maybe I can just talk a little bit about it, is, I've been talking about it, I've been having very young parts come up, and those parts are just mad. They don't feel safe. They don't trust. They feel like the world is falling apart. I'm very confident that this is related to a lot of the very early trauma that I had. And I'm recognizing how much I dissociate. And dissociating isn't necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes when we read and get absorbed in a book, we can dissociate. Like I said, I don't think it's always a bad thing. And I know that when I've had periods in my life where I've been going through very intense feelings and I feel my feelings, and then I kind of need to move on and find something else to do to just, I don't know that this is the best word, a distraction, because the feelings are there, they're not going away. But for me, I can't always sit in my feelings all day, and I need to find a way to find some comfort, some relief. And that can be watching a show. It can be physical. It can be taking a nap. It can be reading. It can be taking a bath. It can be talking with a friend, spending time with an animal, being out in nature. There are lots of different ways that we can find comfort when we are having a hard time. And if we dissociate, it's not always a bad thing. And I think I'm recognizing, I think I've shared this before, that when I work with my coach, intense things come up and my capacity to stay with them is limited, which surprises me because I feel like I have this capacity to go very deep and to understand what's going on. And I'm hitting these new places where I don't understand. I don't have language for it. I can't stay with it for very long. It feels like I jump from subject to subject. And I asked her about this yesterday, and she said it's kind of the ADHD brain, and all of these things are associated, which I always see that and I trust it. But I just have this awareness, and I think I have this judgment that I should be able to go deeper and stay with things longer. And then I worry that she judges me. And we talked about it yesterday, and she said she doesn't. I had to take notes because I started to dissociate. And she does what I do when I talk. I don't make eye contact. I'm going to a place in my brain to get the information, and I lack making eye contact. And what she does the same thing. And so what happens is when she's sharing information with me and I dissociate, she's not looking at me, so she misses the cues. Oftentimes when I go to write a note about what she's saying, that precedes dissociating. And so there's some part of me that knows, and the fear behind the dissociation is you are going to see a part of me that is so wounded and broken, and I need to protect that. I'm very disconnected from this right now, so I'm saying that from recollection, but I could be wrong. Anyways. So this young part that is up for me right now is just really mad and doesn't want to do anything. I feel like, there's refusal, doesn't want to take a walk, doesn't want to go to Fiesta Island with the dogs, doesn't want to go to Aquafit, doesn't want to get out of bed in the morning. I mean, I'm really struggling, and it feels like this very young part is like, you're not the boss of me. You can't make me. You can't make me do anything. And often in the morning, I struggle because if I'm going to exercise and I don't want to take a shower, if I'm going to do Aquafit, I don't want to wash my hair. And I just stay in bed because I have decision paralysis. So one of my hacks right now is I shower at night. And that way in the morning, I can just get up and get clothes on. It doesn't matter. And today was an Aquafit day. And I was thinking we'd take the dogs to Fiesta Island this morning, and my hair needed to be washed. And if I had to struggle with getting out of bed and get my hair done and do all these things before we left, I had some early morning things. So my time was limited. Then I feel pressured by the time. So I decided to take a shower and wash my hair before bed last night and just went to bed with wet hair. So are there things that you can do that make things easier? I generally do not put my clothes out the night before. That just doesn't work for me, but there are times when it does work. And again, it reduces that decision fatigue and the overwhelm that I have. Like I just have to make a decision. And then it was interesting. We did take the dogs to Fiesta Island today, which has a leash-free dog park, but they were closed. But I just found out if you're in San Diego, Fiesta Island, the whole island is a leash-free area for dogs. So we took the dogs to a stretch of the bay where there's sand in the water. We had Zeke and Maisie, and Maisie started to chase a bird, and I don't think she was paying attention, and she ran into the water up to about her armpits. And she is not crazy about the water. She'll go in up to her armpits, but generally doesn't go. And then she rolled in the sand. And I have a hard time with the sand and the mess. I just do. And Zeke loves being in the water, and he ran into the water. He found, there was a piece of driftwood that was floating. So he jumped in and he swam out to it and brought it back in his mouth. So he went in the water quite a bit. And then when we came home, we had to rinse the dogs off, and I was getting ready to record with Jen. It worked out fine, but it was more mess to deal with. And then my office smelled like wet dog, which I'm not real crazy about. But I got to tell you, those dogs look so happy, and the running and the playing, and it brings me joy to see how much joy they have. I think the last two things, they're very minor, but it does tie in and it's relevant. My head is going, they're too trivial to give an example. I have a hard time. My PDA, the pervasive drive for autonomy, also called pathological demand avoidance, is really about having autonomy. I've heard it talked about in terms of having low demands, but what I'm hearing more in the PDA community right now is they're looking at it more as nervous system dysregulation and that need for autonomy to keep the nervous system regulated. And I think about it in terms of demands, and I'm learning all of this stuff. It's unfolding for me, so I may be giving you information that changes over time. I'm doing the best that I can to give you information. But my mom was asking the other day if there's anything that I needed, and I thought about asking her. She has her own place attached to ours. I had some laundry that needed to be done, and I just had a full day, and I asked, and she was totally fine doing it. I think it helps her. She said, "Can I mom you?" And I said, I feel silly, like I can do my own laundry, but it was nice to not have to deal with it and having her do it. The other thing is that I have a hairdresser who lives down the street from me. This is his term. He turned his garage into the garage, and he cuts hair out of his garage. And he's told me he does free bang cuts between cuts, but normally I'm so impulsive that I do my hair, my bangs bug me, and I just cut them and I don't care. And this morning I got up and had to kind of get my hair a little damp since I went to bed with wet hair, and my bangs are just way too heavy. And I've never done this before. I've been seeing him for, I don't know, a couple of years, and just said, "Hey, when you have time, can you cut my bangs?" And he's like, "Yeah, when do you want to do it?" I said, "As soon as possible." He's like, "Do you want to come down now?" And it was like 7:42 in the morning. I'm like, on my way. This is a huge thing for me. Normally my impulsivity gets the best of me, but also I don't want to be a bother and blah, blah, blah. And it's better to just have him cut them. So are there places where it's hard for you to have needs, to ask for what you want? You'd rather do it yourself. You don't want to be a bother. Is it hard for you to say things that are uncomfortable because you're concerned that people will get upset, will get angry? Better for you to be angry and upset or resentful because at least you're in control of that, as opposed to the unknown with other people also having things going on. This stuff is hard, folks. It's just hard. I think I'm going to end this now and either be able to come back on and give you an update about what's going on with Jen, or she and I will hop on and record, and I'll add an intro and outro, and we'll just kind of see what happens to this. All right. I will be talking to you later. Bye-bye. Hey again. So I'm curious to know, because I recorded this a week ago and haven't listened to it. I'm hoping that you got a full enough picture that you feel reassured. I recall re-listening to this episode that you just heard that night or the night after, and I recall feeling like I did a good job owning that it was my step and that Jen didn't do anything that was wrong or bad. So I always think about you and wonder if you're feeling worried or if things are dysregulating to you. My hope is that your nervous system is feeling regulated and this maybe feels validating to you. I don't know. Jen and I are doing fine. It's really nice to have been able to work through this. and to just have the grace that we have for each other. I feel incredibly, incredibly grateful. I have updates on my son and being in the Navy, but I don't feel like this is the place to do it. So I'm going to figure out what to do about that. He's doing okay. It's been rough, and he's doing okay. I think that's all I have. If you are interested in working with me, you can reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive.com. If you want to shoot me an email, it's on my website, or you can just email me at unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's how your brain is wired. You have a right to get dysregulated. You have a right to be upset. You have a right to get angry, to rage, to howl. You have a right to heal your wounding. You have a right to get support. You have a right to have messy, uncomfortable, difficult relationships with challenges. That's part of being human. And I really think that when we do our own work, we have got to do our own work, and we find other people that are doing their own work, the possibilities in friendships and relationships is just really amazing. I'm starting to have some insights, and my husband and I were talking this morning. This kind of has to do with taking up space, that he went to the gym this morning and I turned on music while he was gone. And we've been married almost 27 years. And when he came back, I asked him if he wanted me to turn the music off or turn it down. And I was working in my office, but could hear it from the living room. And I have music in my office. And what I realized is there are two things that come up for me. I know this is a little bit of a departure from what I was doing, but I'm going to proceed. That I think if I listen to music when he's not here, then I don't have to listen to his music when he's home, because we have very different tastes. I'm very particular about when I listen to things, what I listen to, the volume of it, and my sense of justice sensitivity, my autism. Well, if I listen to music when he's here, then I should have to listen to music when he's home. I didn't say that exactly right, but I'm going to trust that you got what my meaning was. And I don't have a lot of room for that because of my autism, unless it's a time when I want to listen to music and I have room for some of his music. He likes a lot of heavy metal stuff, headbanging. That does not work for me. And so because of my justice sensitivity, I tend to sneak my needs. He's not here. I'll listen to music. And we're wired differently. He doesn't have those needs. He doesn't have the justice sensitivity that I have. And he's fine if I have music on and it's louder than, like I think it's loud. And he was saying in the car when I have music on, he can barely hear it. My sensory needs are very different than his. And I think I've been depriving myself of having music because I feel like then I'm going to quote, owe him having to listen, or I'm going to disturb him or disrupt him. And we are wired so differently. We were talking the other morning about something and I asked him something that was a pretty deep question. And he's like, nope. And I was very quiet. And he's like, are you okay? Are you mad? I'm like, no, I was just really realizing how I often worry about things and his reactions because I'm imagining all of these things that could be going on and like nothing's going on for him. And that's probably why our relationship works, because things that would be very upsetting and distressing to me just aren't even on his radar. So anyways, you have a right to have music on. You have a right to have loud music, quiet music, to listen to what you want. You have a right to say no, to set boundaries, to have things the way that you want, to regulate your nervous system, to accommodate yourself and your needs. I think that's all I have. Have a blessed day.